This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Fab India, Tanishq, Fem, Seat, Surf Excel, Maneuver. Brands we've known, bought, some gifted, for years. Last week, some of these names were in the headlines for all the wrong reasons.
Moments after BJP MP Tejasvi Surya slammed Fab India for its latest ad campaign, the hashtag boycott Fab India began trending on social media. The clothing brand had tweeted its latest Diwali collection and named it Jashn-e-Riwaz. BJP Yuva Morcha President Tejasvi Surya wrote, and I quote, "Deepavali is not Jashn-e-Riwaz. This deliberate attempt of Abrahamization of Hindu festivals depicting models without traditional Hindu attires must be called out. And brands like Fab India must face economic costs for such deliberate misadventures."
फैब इंडिया एंड सीटी टायर्स और अब एक नया ब्रांड सामने आया है जिसका नाम है डाबर, जो करवा चौथ के एक एड को लेकर कंट्रोवर्सी में फंस चुका है।
If it was Fab India, Fem and Seat in recent days, not too long back, it was Tanishq, Surf Excel and Maneuver. Mass boycotts, massive trolling on social media, brands buckling under pressure. Soft targets or victims of vendetta? Should brands stay away from social messaging entirely? Or are they being naive to assume that they won't be trolled on so-called sensitive issues like religion and politics? How much wokeness is too much? We find out. For this episode, we invited 3 special guests. Seasoned marketing consultant Kartik Srinivasan, Advertising Standards Council of India or ASCI Secretary General Manisha Kapoor, and veteran marketer Sandeep Ghosh. They throw light on what's behind the hostility, why mass mindsets seem to have changed, and what's a realistic solution in sight. I'm your host Ratna Bhushan, and you're listening to the Morning Brief. Hi Kartik. Prominent brands are increasingly under attack. And this is not the first time it's happening. Last year as well, some brands were trolled, stores were vandalized, employees were threatened. So do you find these ads under scrutiny offensive?
Not at all. I mean, if I look at last year's Tanishq Ekatvam ad campaign featuring Neena Gupta, which was trolled heavily.
रिश्ते हैं कुछ नए नए, धागे हैं ये कच्चे पक्के, अपनेपन से इन्हें सहलाएंगे, प्यार पिरोते जाएंगे। एक जो हुए हम तो क्या ना कर जाएंगे। एकत्वम by Tanishq.
Or any of the ones that have been trolled this year. I mean, I don't find anything offensive at all, mainly for the simple reason I have complete freedom to completely ignore all those ads. It's not being shoved down my throat at all. So I don't find them offensive in any way at all.
So brands must feel the pulse of consumers, right? But is that pulse being swayed deliberately? Is the message out loud and clear? Don't dabble with religion and politics because these are divisive subjects. Kartik says, while people have hated ads or movies for a very long time, and it's normal, the problem now is disagreements reaching absurd levels.
We all have freedom to completely disagree with the brand's messaging. It is perfectly fine. But when these disagreements tend to go on the absurd levels, I mean, it almost sounds farcical at sometimes, the kind of disagreements that people put forward, which has been happening for many, many years. This is not the first time it's happening. But it actually crosses a line when there is a concerted campaign to block or boycott or cancel the brands or reject the brands based on my disapproval of what they are saying, to get more people to also agree, saying you should also disapprove. We should all show our collective economic might by shutting up that brand, which is a very different trajectory that has not happened, which used to happen only with governments earlier or people with heavy political connections earlier. Now, common people are actually initiating a boycott trend about brands and trying to showcase, saying, how dare you say something like this? My feelings are hurt. Let me show you the economic cost of hurting my feelings. That's what's quite different.
Okay, but why do you think this is happening? You said like it's quite different and it's a recent phenomena. So what is there an agenda behind it? Why are brands being intimidated? Is it a strategy to distract from other narratives?
I think people are following the trajectory of politicians because they've seen that for politicians, it works very, very well. They can say anything and everything they want. There is no legal repercussion for them. They actually win elections because of their political divide and hate and divide and rule rhetoric. So why can't we hold brands accountable for something that I don't like? The brands have become soft targets just because they are certain. In fact, I could tell you a very, very interesting and a very bizarre example. There is a new ad from Acko, which is very, very funny. And it is actually set in a place where a customer is doing puja for his brand new car.
Congratulations, Murthy man. New car, huh?
Yeah.
You bought your car insurance from Acko app, right?
And then there is some slapstick comedy around why he didn't check the Acko app for a best kind of, like in terms of the price for insurance value and etc. And somebody is commenting saying, how dare he use a Hindu ceremony like a car puja to make slapstick comedy? How dare he do that? I mean, who even thinks like this? But these days, everybody is trying to poke holes in every single direction, in every ad, every poke, everywhere completely and saying, let's make this loud, let's make this noisy, let's make this viral. We'll probably get something out of this.
We asked ASCI, or the Advertising Standards Council of India's Manisha, if any of the ads under scrutiny violated ASCI's code of conduct. So, ASCI's code of conduct requires all advertising to be legal, decent, honest, and truthful, and not hazardous or harmful to the viewers. Here's what she has to say.
In some cases, Ratna, we did receive complaints for some of the ads that have been, spoken about. In most cases, we did not find that they violated the ASCII code. Because what the ASCII code provides for is actually for ads, not to be repulsive and not to be in the light of generally, prevailing standards of decency and propriety, that they should not cause grave and widespread offense. And I think while some of these ads may be offensive, to a group of people or a group of individuals, I think the deliberations in the Consumer Complaints Council were that they did not seem to be of the kind that would cause grave and widespread offense. So that's, where ASCII stands. And in fact, if you look at perhaps even, what the Supreme Court has said in certain cases, not related, of course, directly to these advertisements, but in terms of, generally what might be considered, offensive. What the Supreme Court also says is that, the standards need to be taken from an ordinary man or an ordinary person and not of someone who's out of the ordinary or hypersensitive. So I think those are perhaps the guidelines that we need to apply even as ASCII, to decide whether something can be said to have caused grave and widespread offense.
So much for all the uproar. Manisha says we are all seeing greater degree of hostility, and obviously advertising is not immune to that. So how concerned is ASCII?
There is a degree of concern in terms of balancing the need for freedom of expression and speech as guaranteed by the Constitution versus, it not being highly repulsive or highly, something which can cause great and widespread offense to people. So that balance is important. And yes, we are concerned about, whether that balance is maintained in all cases.
Are brands being too naive to assume they won't be trolled on so-called contentious subjects? We went to the expert himself, veteran marketer and corporate strategy advisor Sandeep Ghosh, to find out more.
See, the first question I'd ask is, what is the relevance of it? What's your purpose? Who's your TG? What's the message you're trying to give? if you're being woke for the sake of being woke, or because it's again trendy to be woke, I think that's a first judgment call people have to take. So this kind of ads, one iconic marketing director whom I've knew for a long time, he would call them the ABMM category, which meant Aa Bail Mujhe Maar. You're kind of inviting things, and he would very politely tell the brand manager or the ad agency, "Oh, fantastic ad, great ad, lovely ad. Why don't you keep it for your awards and give me something more simple, more direct?" I think that question should be asked in a lot of these things. What is your purpose? Are you trying to be a social reformer? If you're trying to be a social reformer, if that's the mandate of your brand, then I think you should be having some skin in the game as well. You stick your neck out and don't expect to be, may expect to be lauded, but if you're not lauded, you have to take that in your stride.
Which brings us to the question, are mass opinions being consciously swayed to suit certain narratives in the first place? Is it a conscious effort to sway mass sentiments which is forcing brands to withdraw ads or change their strategies? Here's what Karthik has to say.
I wouldn't say so. So if this boycott call or this trend of trying to disagree with some brand's message remains online in terms of Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp updates kind of stuff, I don't think brands would care much actually, because it's a large country. There are millions of people. A few people making noise here saying, I don't agree with what you say, how you say it, etc. It's not going to matter much. But when it transcends offline and stores are actually being targeted, employee safety is at question, brands obviously need to do something like that. But that's not the case this year actually.
Jashn Rivaaz by Fab India.
Because if you look at Fab India, and to some extent how initially Byju's seemed to have capitulated by actually trying to pause ads featuring Shah Rukh Khan, which is more of a PR reaction, saying there is bad news around that brand ambassador, let's not make it worse by showing it in front of people. But that's just a PR reaction. There was no offline threats at all. It was just a purely online boycott call. In fact, even Zomato, it was a purely online boycott call.
Food aggregator Zomato found itself in a linguistic tangle after one of its executives tutored a customer in Chennai about Hindi being their national language. Vikash, a resident of Chennai, had ordered a few food items, and when he found one missing, he demanded a refund like all of us do. Now here is where trouble erupted. In a series of chats that Vikash posted, the customer care executive, while failing to contact the said restaurant, allegedly because of a language barrier, commented how everyone should know a little bit of Hindi as it is our national language.
But actually Zomato engaged. They did not just silently do something in the background. They engaged, including the CEO actually explained the actions. They first took an action which was seen as wrong because they just fired the employee, but then they reinstated the employee, which was the right thing to do. So there was some engagement happening, but I think Fab India probably capitulated too silently and too fast.
So when did mindsets of the masses change so much? After all, such kind of ads have been made for years.
So there are two ways to look at it. One, for instance, if you look at the earlier kind of boycotts which have gone to the offline level, not just online or not just media level, offline. For instance, Bombay as a movie faced heavy criticism from people. There was some riots on the roads and etc. And there were threats to the director. All that stuff happened. That was also politically motivated at the time, and that also happened at the same time. But those were actually pre-internet era, where only few people had the power to share their opinions and shape opinions as a result. So it required television and print kind of mainstream media to share that counterpoint, saying, this is why you should hate this movie. This is why you should hate this book. This is why you should not you should not like what is being said in the name of a movie or a book or an ad kind of stuff. So it traveled much lesser. And even if people had a point of view to share, they just shared it among themselves. Now, somebody could sit in their dark room in their own pajamas and t-shirts and actually share something which is completely stupid or absurd, which is my opinion, which is not their opinion, obviously. but they can actually share it to the entire world on Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp, and it can travel to the entire world within the next half an hour. Now, once you read that counterpoint saying, oh, I missed that point in that ad where they're showing this about this Hindu ceremony, I completely missed it. It was so funny in the first instance. And now you can't unsee it because you've already seen a new way to see things. You can't unsee it. And that travels, and the more people see it and the more people agree saying, oh, aisa bhi de sakte hai kya? And then it goes on kind of thing. So there are a lot more micro aggressions online which can just pick up in terms of big viral aggressions. I think to some extent, internet and social media made aggressions and disagreements viral, and it's still continuing to happen nowadays.
So how does all this impact brand sales? Or does it at all? After all, the main objective of making ads is to inform and persuade people to buy products in the first place, isn't it?
यहाँ पे देख लो डाबर का जो है Q1 का क्वार्टरली रिजल्ट आ चुका है. अगर आप कंपेयर करते हो तो इसी ईयर क्वार्टर के लास्ट ईयर से कंपेयर करना होता है. अगर आप प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस की बात करते हो, प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस फॉर द पीरियड में यहाँ जहाँ पे 341 करोड़ का था वो बढ़ के हो गया 438 करोड़ का. मतलब प्रॉफिट इंक्रीजिंग है यहाँ पे. ये जो है जिस सेगमेंट से रेवेन्यू अर्न की हुई वहाँ.
Titan has slipped off the highs after its first quarter update, which optically indicates a very strong performance. So 117% revenue growth over last year is what the company is reported as far as the first quarter is concerned.
If I remember right, Tanishq was facing boycott calls twice last year. And when I saw their FY 2020-2021 results in March, April, they posted quite healthy profits. So I would say with a Tanishq or a Titan or a Tata, they did not face material impact in terms of economic costs. I don't know what will it be for Fab India for the kind of boycott call and the quick capitulation that happened. That, only the brand can say. But we are again looking at it from very large brands point of view, like a Tanishq or a Byju's or a Fab India. Imagine the same thing happening to a very small brand. So imagine a smaller brand which is just using Instagram ads or just Facebook ads to actually communicate something. People poke holes and then try to boycott that brand because they didn't capitulate enough or they didn't apologize soon enough. It could probably be lethal for the brand. So I would probably say not just look at the larger brand and their kind of results or in terms of their books, also the smaller brands could also be affected. But I think with Titan or Tanishq, they are probably too big to fail. They're very, very large. So I don't think the last year's boycott campaigns affected them negatively, but we don't know what can happen with them.
Should brands stay away from social messaging entirely? So, should they just steer clear of politics and religion in their advertising?
It is almost impossible to do that because anything and everything that is shown in the ad can be scrutinized with a microscope to say, hey, how did you do that? How dare you say something? For instance, I would just tell you, there's a new campaign I was reading about in ET online. Actually, it was actually, I think, ET pranked me. Just about 5 minutes back, I was seeing it. It was for JBL. And they were trying to showcase their noise cancellation feature with a Diwali theme. So the simple theme was like this. There is a girl who's actually sitting in a corner and I think it's her brother who's actually bursting crackers just outside. And she's actually wearing a white JBL headphones and she's able to hear the noise of the crackers. So she actually clicks a button on the JBL headphones and then there is no noise anymore and she's not able to listen. I'm sure somebody could poke a hole in saying, how dare you say that you don't like the sound of crackers? It's a holy cultural celebration of India. You are supposed to listen to them. You're not supposed to cancel that noise. It's a holy noise. I'm sure somebody could say that too. So it is almost impossible to say what will hurt somebody, what will not hurt somebody. The better option is for those people who are hurt by it to look at other things that make them not hurt, basically. That's a far better option than trying to poke holes in so many directions.
We asked Manisha if ASCII plans to put in place any guidelines to protect brands, especially if they haven't violated any codes of conduct.
So far as ASCII is concerned, I think, we take each case on its merit and we look at, the content of the advertising and deliberate whether it is in violation of the ASCII code, and we obviously give our recommendations on that, as we've done in some of these cases. I think what you're referring to perhaps is in the nature of a law and order problem arising out of these kind of activities or these kind of discussions that happen on social media, where I think the responsibility there then squarely lies with the state and the government. ASCI certainly, can give its recommendations based on the merit of each individual case in terms of whether we feel it violates the ASCI code or not.
Sandeep, tell us, should brands stay away from social messaging entirely? Because, this is the kind of advertising which is coming under scrutiny.
Is the point of a jihad tire to lecture people on bursting crackers or taking wedding processions in the way? And if you're doing that, if you're running a series, it's not a one ad. If you're wanting to run a series and be a social messaging, then the point which people are saying that then be even-handed. If you really want to be a social messaging vehicle, you take that as your position, then be even-handed. Talk about everybody. Why do you pick up a wedding and a Diwali or something? Then don't be picky on that.
So what is the solution to all this? Is this kind of policing here to stay? I asked Karthik and Manisha, and here's what they said.
Yes, there is a solution, but that's not in the hands of brands or people. I would say it's in the hands of both politicians and the judiciary. Brands and people need to feel safe that absurd things will not result in a boycott call or economic cost for the brand at all. I mean, obviously, you could still argue saying what is absurd to me could not be absurd to you. If brands and people are sure that they have legal recourse before something happens, in terms of an offline threat or an offline visit by the petty thugs of the neighborhood, before something happens, they have a recourse. Before some violence happens, they have a recourse. That there would be more confidence saying, we are not doing anything illegal. We are not miscommunicating. We are not misleading people. We are just advertising with the stories that we have heard and we are living through. That's completely right. Somebody disagrees. It's perfectly fine, but it's not going to end up in something untoward at all. That confidence needs to come. I don't think that confidence is there right now, which is very, very unfortunate in our situation. But if it's there, I think people would be a lot more chilled out.
So I think the ASCI guidelines as they stand today are pretty clear. And I think they are, in that sense, quite fair, which, say that advertisements should not be offensive to the general accepted standards of public decency and should not cause grave and widespread offense. What is perhaps needed both from advertisers, is a certain sensitivity towards the environment today. And, therefore, for each brand to also decide what are the boundaries that it wishes to draw around itself. For members of the public to accept certain perhaps recommendations with, which ASCI might give with a level of maturity. And for them to also perhaps, take it up at the right forums. For someone who truly feels that these advertisements are dangerous or should not be there in the public domain, I think my advice really would be to then approach the correct authorities who can adjudicate on the matter, who can decide on the matter, and then for both sides to have the maturity to accept, what that decision may be. That is, what I would advise both brands as well as people who are objecting to certain advertisements. Both sides need to kind of be a little bit more aware and sensitive to each other.
While Fab India was accused of defacing the Hindu festival of Diwali by naming its festive collection Jasn-e-Riwaaz, or Celebration of Tradition, the apparel company says its festive collection is called Chilmil Si Diwali. But it did buckle under pressure and promptly removed all advertising after the fierce backlash. In case of Tanishq last year, things went seriously downhill after it released an ad which showed an interfaith couple at a baby shower. It was trolled massively on social media, its employees were threatened, stores were vandalized. That's not all. Clothing brand Manyavar, which appeared to question an old tradition, came in for similar flack. So did a Holi ad by Surf Excel, which showed children of two different religions celebrating together. Clearly, as Zomato's Dipinder Goyal tweeted famously last week, The level of tolerance and chill in our country needs to be way higher than what it is now. With brands like Fab India set for a public listing, negative publicity is the last thing they would need. On Monday, Dabur apologized for the Fem ad, stating that its intention is not to offend any beliefs, customs and traditions. Fab India declined to participate in this podcast. I'm Ratna Bhushan and you're listening to The Morning Brief. This episode was edited and coordinated by Bhavya Dilip Kumar. The audio production of this episode was done by Swati Joshi and the sound edits were done by Varun Kapahi. We're signing off and hope you enjoyed listening to the episode. Do send in your feedback to themorningbrief@timesgroup.com and do share the episode on your social media networks. The Morning Brief airs every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Thank you for listening and have a nice day ahead. All external sound clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits mentioned in the description box. Thank you.